Hey guys, we are now in the final stretch before the midterm elections on the 8th of November, and so today, 12 days away from those elections, I will be updating my prediction for the 2022 Senate map. And so a lot has definitely changed in just the last couple of days. Democrats are in a better position in Nevada, which is a seat that they currently hold. However, in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman's odds against Mehmet Oz have dropped significantly as a result of a terrible debate performance as a result of the effects of his stroke. And so right now, even though this map was very easily winnable for Republicans a couple of months back, they really have struggled, and Democrats have come back and they're still in the fight for the majority. However, things are definitely looking a bit better for Republicans as a result of the developments over the last week. And so we're going to start off by filling in the solid races for both parties. These are essentially the guaranteed seats that Democrats or Republicans are not going to lose. So Democrats are going to hold onto their seats in all of the traditional Democratic states. This will give them at least 43 seats. And then for Republicans, they do have a few more because they are defending a whole ton more seats this cycle. So this will give the GOP 42 seats with their solid races filled in. So 43, 42 with just the states that are going to be safe. This means margins of over 15% or more. And so now we're going to move on to the other races. These are going to be likely lean and tilt elections, and we're going to go in order of increasing competitiveness. And so we're going to start off with Indiana and Connecticut. These races aren't going to be close at all, but the parties that are going to win them are probably not going to do so by over 15%. So in Indiana, Todd Young is still going to win a second term against Thomas McDermott, but the polling really isn't showing him up by too much. Now, in the end, the polls are going to be wrong. Todd Young is going to win by a much larger margin than 2 or 3 points, but because he only won by 9.7% in 2016, I don't think he'll get to 15% this year. So Indiana is going to be the first likely state on this map, and it will be followed by Connecticut, where Richard Blumenthal leads by 12 points in the polls. He's obviously going to win, but not by his 2016 margin, which was 28%. He definitely is going to do much worse this year than last time, but he's still going to win his race nonetheless, and Richard Blumenthal will be elected to a second term in Congress. So the state of Connecticut is going to be likely Democratic, and this will give both Democrats and Republicans one extra seat. Next up, we have two races that Republicans are doing surprisingly poor in. These are the elections in Utah and Iowa. In Utah, Mike Lee is really freaking out about potentially losing to Evan McMullin. We've seen a couple of polls showing McMullin actually ahead in this election, and so Mike Lee right now is begging for the endorsement of his fellow Senator Mitt Romney, who has at this point declined to do so. And so McMullin has received the endorsement of the Utah Democratic Party, and so he has the support of both Democrats and independents, as well as a huge chunk of Republicans who do not support the former president. And so Mike Lee, who is very closely aligned with the MAGA movement, is struggling, and so that's why Utah is only going to be a likely state for him, despite him winning his first election in 2016 by 41%. And then in Utah, Chuck Grassley is running for re-election as a 7-time incumbent. When elected, Chuck Grassley will become the longest-serving member of Congress after Patrick Leahy retires. He'll be the only outgoing Democrat this year. And so Michael Franken is running a very strong campaign in the state against Grassley. And so as Grassley has gotten older, his electoral prowess has weakened to the point where now he's only ahead by 7% in a state that he should be winning by at least 20 points. And he won by that margin in 2016. 30 points was his margin back in 2010. And then in 2004, Chuck Grassley managed to win his 5th term by over 40 points. And so this is really the first competitive election we've seen between Chuck Grassley and a Democratic challenger since his first election back in 1980. And so just like Utah, Iowa is also going to be just likely Republican. And then we have just one more likely race the Democrats are going to easily win, and that is the election in Washington, where Patty Murray leads by 8.6% against Tiffany Smiley. I think this election is going to be closer than what the polls suggest, but honestly, Tiffany Smiley stands no chance. Patty Murray already won a majority in the blanket primary. The 4-time incumbent is not going to lose her 5th term to an unknown Republican. Tiffany Smiley has never run for political office in the past, but she really is doing quite a good job being boosted by the national environment, and Patty Murray isn't all too exciting of a candidate. She did win by 18 points in 2016, but this year is going to be different, and so that's why Washington is only going to be a likely Democratic state, and I don't think that Murray is going to win by a double-digit margin. And so now with the map at 45-45, we now have the actual competitive races this year. These are going to be the 10 races that are going to decide the makeup of the upper chamber of Congress. These are the races that either party has a realistic chance at winning, although it is much likely that some races flip than others. So the first one we have is Florida, where Marco Rubio is running for re-election against Val Demings. Rubio won by 7.7% in 2016, but this time I don't think he's actually going to do much better. I think the margin is going to be very similar to the one from 6 years ago, because Val Demings is running a strong campaign as a Democratic challenger, but honestly, it's still not going to be enough. Rubio is a very popular incumbent, somebody who has major national recognition, and so even though he's probably going to do worse than Ron DeSantis is in the governor election, Marco Rubio is still on track to winning his re-election a third time. He's basically led in every single poll ever released, and when looking at this race just a few months ago, Rubio was up by a double-digit margin. In fact, at one point, he was ahead by 20 points just a year ago, and so this election has definitely gotten a lot closer between Rubio and Demings, but Demings is not going to make up the gap in a state that's continuing to shift to the right. So Florida is also going to be a likely state, but just barely, with Marco Rubio winning re-election. And the other likely state that we have for Democrats is going to be Colorado. This is going to be the last likely Democratic state on this map, where Michael Bennet is running for re-election to a third term as well. However, he was appointed in 2009, so he does have a bit more experience than Rubio. He has subsequently won re-election in both 2010 and 2016, and right now he's ahead by 8.8% in the polls. And so yes, even though Marco Rubio is up by a smaller margin, I do think he'll outperform Michael Bennet. Michael Bennet won by 6 points in 2016 to a second term. He did do better than Hillary Clinton, but this year, I don't think Bennet is going to do better than Joe Biden from 2020. Joe Dea is running a strong campaign, but as a Republican in a state that's shifting more and more to the right, it's simply unrealistic to see Republicans flip this seat. So Colorado is going to be likely Democratic, and from this point on, every single race that we have left for Democrats is going to be either lean or tilt. However, Republicans do still have a few likely states left, and the first one we have is Wisconsin, where Ron Johnson is running for re-election to a third term against Mandela Barnes. Johnson said he was not going to run for a third time after winning in 2016, but with this pressure from Donald Trump and many other top Republicans, Johnson has chosen to run again, and that was a very good decision by Republicans. If Ron Johnson was not the nominee, Mandela Barnes would have a very good chance at flipping a seat in a state that Joe Biden won in 2020. However, Ron Johnson has proven that he's been able to outperform polling expectations. He did so in both 2010 and most recently in 2016, when basically every single poll had him losing re-election, but he still won against Russ Feingold, a former two-term senator, by 3.4%. And so this year, Ron Johnson, I think, will win by over 5% and deliver this seat for the third time for the Republican Party. And so Wisconsin is going to be a likely Republican state, but it's not going to be anywhere near a double-digit margin for the GOP, but a win nonetheless in a state that they look like they might actually be losing just a few months ago, when Mandela Barnes was leading pretty significantly in the polling after first winning the Democratic primary. Next up, in North Carolina, Ted Budd is on track to defeat Sherry Beasley. He is now up by 2.6% in the polling, and Ted Budd is going to succeed Richard Burr, who has chosen to retire. Burr would win this seat pretty easily by maybe even double digits this year, but even though Ted Budd is not the incumbent, he's still doing relatively well. Democrats are not going to flip a seat in the Tar Heel state this year. They've tried very hard in the past unsuccessfully, most importantly in 2020. This is the election that I'm basing my 2022 prediction on, because even though every single poll showed Cal Cunningham winning, Tom Tillis still came out on top by 1.7%. Yes, Cunningham did have that major scandal towards the end of his campaign, but still, he was leading every single poll in the final weeks leading up to the race, and so Tom Tillis' win, I think, cements the fact that North Carolina is just not ready to flip yet. The last time Democrats won a presidential or Senate race here was in 2008, and that was a huge blue wave year after 8 years of George W. Bush. And so Cal Cunningham's loss, I think, would have been prevented if he did not have that scandal with sexting, and then, of course, his wife also divorced him just weeks before the election. So that was terrible for the Democratic Party. They would be at 51 seats and in a much better position to retain the majority if Cal Cunningham actually won, but that's simply not what happened, and so so this year, with everything that we're seeing, the national trend shifting in favor of Republicans once again, North Carolina is not going to go blue, and it will remain in the Republican column. And so that's why at this point in time, I still do have it as a likely Republican, just like Wisconsin. And then now we have just one more likely state on this map, and that is going to be Ohio, where J.D. Vance is going to defeat Tim Ryan. Now, honestly, Tim Ryan is still doing pretty well. I mean, he should not be this competitive in an election that Republicans should win very easily, but J.D. Vance's poor campaigning has not been enough for Democrats to win. Yes, in 2018, Sherrod Brown was reelected, but if Tim Ryan ran against J.D. Vance in a 2018 type environment, I do think Ryan would come out on top. He's won 10 elections in swing districts, representing districts in the House for Ohio over the last 2 decades, but J.D. Vance, the fact that he'll be running with an R next to his name, that will be enough for him to win. And so even though Democrats have spent millions of dollars on this election, they're simply not going to flip a state that Donald Trump won by 8% in both 2016 and 2020, not in a year like 2022. And so as a result, Ohio is going to be the final likely state on this map. And so we really do have a lot of likely races for Republicans this year, but I do think that in the more competitive ones of Wisconsin, Ohio, North Carolina, and Florida, Republicans are going to come out on top, not by double-digit margins, but slightly over 5 points. And with 5 races remaining now, we only have the lean and tilt elections left. So in New Hampshire, I'm going to go over this race first because I do think it's not in the same category as these final 4, because Democrats are going to win in New Hampshire. Maggie Hassan just isn't going to win by over 5%. Her polling numbers have tightened over the last few weeks. Don Bolduc is doing better, but Maggie Hassan, who was able to flip this seat against an incumbent in 2016, which was a very difficult feat to do because Hillary Clinton did terrible in New Hampshire in 2016, but Hassan still pulled off the victory against Kelly Ayotte, and so this year she'll be almost impossible to defeat. But polling has definitely shown that this race is getting more competitive, and so that's why, just to be cautious, I am moving New Hampshire down into the lean Democratic column, but it will still be a race the Democrats are going to hold on to. So with the 4 most important elections left, we have a 49-47 map. Republicans need to win 2 out of the 3 remaining seats, while Democrats need to win 3, and of course 3 of these seats right now are currently held by Democrats. We have not seen any flips so far on this map. Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia are Democratic seats that Democrats have to hold on to if they want to win, or they can lose one of them, but they have to flip Pennsylvania as well, which is currently held by Republican Pat Toomey. And so the first race I'm going to go over in these final 4 is going to be Pennsylvania, where we've seen a whole ton of developments in just the last couple of days. So in the last 2 weeks, we've seen polling tighten between John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz. Right now, Fetterman is up by 2.3% in the polls, despite being ahead by 6 points at the beginning of this month. And to make things worse, John Fetterman had a terrible debate performance on the 25th of October. So this will have been released after you guys watch that debate. And the debate really is going to have a major impact on the election. We've seen debates in other states like Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, North Carolina. I mean, those debates really aren't going to matter in the end. But that debate in Pennsylvania was just terrible for the Democratic Party. John Fetterman just could not get his words out as a result of his stroke. He's still recovering from that, and even though I don't think he should be penalized because of a health condition that he's been able to overcome, that is not going to matter to voters. Politics is all about perception, and John Fetterman looked weak on the debate stage, and that's why he is going to lose this race. And with just 2 weeks left, it'll be very difficult to save him. The Democratic Party should not have gotten John Fetterman onto that stage. They should have avoided it at all costs. They should have made some sort of excuse like the one that Katie Hobbs made in Arizona. No matter what, it was not going to be a good look, but putting Fetterman out there on a nationally televised debate was the worst possible thing his campaign could have done. And so that's why right now I'm moving Pennsylvania from tilt Democratic to lean Republican. I really don't think Democrats are going to be able to take this race back after what happened. But despite this, Democrats are still going to win in Arizona. I don't think it's going to flip. I think it's going to be either tilt or lean Democratic, but right now I'm going to be more safe and give it a lean rating. I don't think Mark Kelly is going to do that badly, but I think he's going to win by a similar margin to the one he had in 2020 in the special election. And so this year, Mark Kelly is running for his first full term. He leads by 5 points in the polls. Yes, this race has gotten a little bit closer, but so far, Blake Masters has not led or even tied Kelly in a single poll that's ever been released for this election. Even the Trafalgar political group still has Mark Kelly winning. And so right now, Mark Kelly, a very strong incumbent, is on track to still win re-election this November. I think that he'll be able to win by at least 1%, maybe less than 1 if things go badly for him in the next 12 days. But really, it's unlikely that Republicans are going to flip this seat, mainly because Blake Masters was chosen as the nominee. If the Republican electorate chose somebody that Donald Trump did not endorse, that being either Jim Layman or Mark Bronovich, I think they could defeat Mark Kelly. But with Blake Masters being the worst possible choice that Republicans actually ended up choosing, Mark Kelly is going to win. And so that's why Arizona right now is still in the Democratic column. And so now we have just 2 races remaining, and whichever party wins in Nevada, I think is going to have a huge boost going into the election in Georgia, because the election in Georgia is not going to be decided on the 8th of November. Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker are not going to get anywhere near the 50% that they need. There is a strong libertarian candidate, that being Chase Oliver, in the race. Oliver even appeared in a debate alongside Warnock, and so I don't think Warnock or Walker are going to win the race outright, which means that a runoff will be held sometime in most likely December. The date has not been scheduled yet, but I think that whoever wins in Nevada is going to have the momentum going into Georgia. And so right now, the best thing for Democrats to do is to shift their focus away from Pennsylvania and towards Nevada. If Democrats can get to their 49th seat in Nevada, they can win Georgia, and that will give them 50. But if Republicans already win a majority without Georgia, Democrats just aren't going to be as motivated to come out in favor of Warnock in the Peach State when that runoff does occur. So in Nevada, I think Adam Laxalt is still right now the slight favorite, but this race is still very, very close. Catherine Cortez Masto still has a very good chance at winning. Republicans underperformed polling in 2018. So Nevada is not going to be a state where Democrats are just going to do much worse than what polling data suggests in states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, or Wisconsin. In Nevada, that is not the case. Polling isn't too bad here, and so Masto still does have a very, very good chance at winning re-election. But right now, my rating for Nevada is not going to change. It will still be tilt Republican, but this is still going to be the race that Democrats need to win, and a race that I think they still have a chance in. And finally, in Georgia, I think we're just going to have to wait for the other races' results to see who's going to win in the runoff. Like I said before, Warnock and Walker are not going to get to 50%. There will be a runoff. This election is just way too close. I think Warnock will win the plurality in the first round, but if Democrats only win 48 seats after November 8th, they're probably not going to win in Georgia, because even if they do win the seat, Democrats are not going to keep the majority, and so Republicans will have the energy going into the Georgia election. So the midterms right now really do hinge on Nevada. We can focus on Georgia later. That election will still occur, but it's not going to be right now. It's not going to be in 12 days. Right now, Democrats need to focus on taking back the advantage in Nevada, because I think Pennsylvania is a lost cause, and of course, Democrats also need to make sure that they will win in Arizona, which I do think is much more likely. So we do have still a very contentious battle, but things are moving in favor of the GOP. And so this is the 2022 Senate map based on my latest projections. Of course, I realize that many of you guys will be disappointed, as a lot of you guys are hoping for Democrats to win, but the fact of the matter is that Republicans have improved their chances significantly in just the last week, and I would be doing a huge disservice to you guys if I were to continue saying the Democrats were in a better position when they simply aren't. I always try to be as unbiased as possible, and right now things are starting to slip away from Democrats, but they can still win it back. We still have 12 very important days to go. If Democrats win in just Nevada, they still have a very good chance at retaining the Senate. And so right now, 51, 48, and 1 runoff is my projection. So that will be it for this video. Make sure you stay tuned for the latest midterm updates, and I will see you guys in the next video.